Hello, welcome to the Yellowhead-Blue River Road Camp's online talk with speaker Leanne Sumiko Riding. My name is Isabel, and I am the Museum Assistant Intern at the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center, and I'll be your MC for tonight. Our agenda for tonight's webinar will start with some introductions, followed by Leanne's presentation, and we'll end with Q&A. Feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box below, and we will get to answering them at the end of the presentation. Our mission at the NNMCC is to honor, preserve, and share the history and heritage of Japanese Canadians and Japanese culture in Canada. As a nationally recognized museum, it is our vision to provide a gathering space that bridges Japanese and Canadian arts, fostering pride in Japanese Canadian heritage and a strong multicultural Canada. The Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center is on the homelands of the Squamish and Hunkaminam-speaking people. We acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam First Nations. Tonight's speaker, Leanne Sumiko Riding, is a descendant of Tajima internees and grew up in Valemount, BC. Her northeastern BC hometown is where the Yellowhead-Blue River Road camps were located. Since 2013, she has been studying all aspects of the YBR project with her father, Art Carson. She assisted with the process of installing new memorial signage at Mount Robson, BC, and created Kaido Research Studio to continue studies of this era of Japanese Canadian history. Again, feel free to type in questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to answering them after the presentation. Thank you all again for joining. I will now hand it over to Leanne.
There we are. Now you can hear me. Thanks, Nicola. And I'll just, I'm going to add on a couple of additional acknowledgements there. So the study takes place in the traditional lands of the Leilitene First Nation and also notably the Simp First Nation, whose traditional lands encompasses this basically this entire area. So something to keep in mind while you're learning about all this. And I also just want to thank the Nikkei Heritage Center for giving me this opportunity, because I'm really excited to be able to share this knowledge with this audience. I think you'll find it quite interesting. And so I just want to start by just talking a little bit about the region and the topic, which is the Yellowhead-Blue River Highway Project. The name Yellowhead-Blue River Highway Project isn't my name. It's the name of a road building project from 1942. And the purpose of it was to make use of the people who they were considered to be enemy aliens, and make use of their labor in order to build a road that was in high demand at the time. And there were 4 other such projects that used labor in this way, which were also the Revelstoke-Sicamous Highway Project, the Hope-Princeton Highway Project, and then there was one in Ontario, which was the Jackfish-Schreiber Highway Project. And they were very similar, but there were differences between them. They were a bit smaller than the one that I was studying. But one thing that they all shared was that they were, in a way, this is one of the ways that the Japanese Canadian internment differed from the Japanese American experience. So what we did in Canada is we viewed Japanese Canadians as a labor resource, especially men, but women included. And how that played out was different demographics were selected and sent to different places in large groups to do different kinds of work. And at the same time, all the other things that we know about with the Japanese Canadian internment were going on as well. So they were witnessing things happening to their family members while they were far away and in work camps, and watching it all play out and not able to do anything about it. And of course, this was all very frustrating. And so this is kind of a story about what was happening in the camps of the Yellowhead-Blue River Highway Project, while the bigger picture of the Japanese Canadian internment was playing out. And what I'm going to do is, rather than just give like an overview kind of picture, I'm going to go camp by camp through each camp and just give a little description of each one, which means that there won't be a lot of like, it's just going to be like a taste of each camp. And I'll show pictures from each. And a lot of the pictures are going to be pictures that me and my father took in 2015 and 2016. And we also had some help at the time because we had an assistant. His name was David Bragdon. He came along, another volunteer. Really great photos and good sandwiches. And what I thought we were doing when we started is a field study of history, but what I quickly learned is when you do something like that in the park, you're not doing history anymore. You're doing archaeology, and even if you're not digging holes in the ground, you you need permits. So suddenly, what I was doing transformed into an archaeological study, and I kind of had to take it a little bit more seriously and do things properly. So a lot of the information that I'm sharing will be from that study and related to gathering it. So one of the things I can share while I'm talking about it is whether or not the sites that we went to can actually be visited in modern times, because that was one of the reasons why we wanted to go and document them. Like what we a lot of them we didn't even know where they were. They had been lost. So how could we even suggest to people to go there? Because who knows where they even were. So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start out in Geeky Camp. So first of all, I have to, let's see here. That's the one I want. Okay. All right. And I'm hoping you can see pictures of tents now. If not, I hope you'll give me a heads up there. And so what we're looking at now is we're looking at pictures of A1 Geeky Camp, which is in the Mayette River watershed, which flows into the Athabasca River and then the Arctic Ocean. And it's pretty high altitude. It's like 3,500 to 3,600 feet, or like more than 1,000 meters over sea level. So Geeky Camp was a 100-person tent camp in Jasper National Park. It opened on February 26, 1942, and it closed on July 28, 1942. So the camp was not there for a long time, but it seemed like it probably was quite an impactful experience, not least because of what was going on at the time, which was while you're away, your entire family being moved to a concentration camp, and your property, who knows what's happening to it, terrible things. And not being able to do anything about it at the same time. And while you're supposedly just a worker in a camp, but fully realizing that you're not allowed to leave. And if you did anything wrong, you're probably going to be sent to Angler concentration camp in Ontario, which is like a really serious prisoner of war camp. And I should point out that the laborers in this camp, Geeky Camp, they were, let me see if I can flip to the next one. Oh, by the way, you're going to see a lot of these pictures in color because while doing photo analysis, which I'll explain a little bit about it, I have been recently starting to colorize them because deep details pop out that I couldn't see before, and not all the color is very helpful. Like, I don't think these rocks in the middle should actually be green, but it does allow me to see things a little bit better sometimes. So I thought I'd share that with you as well. This picture here, this is from the Izaki family collection in the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center. And a lot of the photos that I'll be showing will be from the Nikkei National Museum archives. Um, so the workers, like the photographer here, when they were first sent here, they were part of a group that that was sort of touted as a volunteer construction corps. And I'm not sure if the person who took this picture was a member of that first group, because there were some later groups that were sent. But the first group at least was allowed some dignity in allowing themselves to be considered volunteers, although they weren't really. They didn't have a choice, but at least they could say, well, I chose to be among the first. And but within like maybe a week, that whole that changed. And so the next few people who were sent to this camp in Kiki were people that got scooped up off of Powell Street. So like the business manager of the New Canadian Issei newspaper. And so that would be like the newspaper for Canadian-born Japanese Canadians. He ended up here, and not by choice for sure. He's just a young man, and I'm sure he wanted to continue doing what he was doing in Vancouver. So at that point, basically they weren't called such, but they were being treated like prisoners of war. And they technically were, because the people in this project, what their demographic was they were by intention born in Japan. There were a few who weren't, because they came there to join their family members. But this project was for people who were born in Japan. And so in our community, we like to call them issei. So I'll call them issei. And at the time in English language, they would be called Japanese nationals, referring to the fact that they came here and they weren't Canadian born, and they weren't naturalized Canadians. So I'm just gonna move on to the next picture here. So I've spoken a bit about who was in Geeky Camp, and Geeky Camp was actually just a part of the big picture of camps in BC, because this Geeky Camp was a conscientious objector camp the year before it became a camp for these issei. And the conscientious objectors were mostly Mennonites, but there were a few other groups in there. And they were still working in the Jasper area. And they had actually set up the camp originally, but they had to make it quite a bit bigger because there was going to be many more people in it. And so the first group that came in, all they had was like maybe 4 tents, and it was like minus 30 degrees Celsius. So they were sent too early, and they had to continue on to Red Pass, because only half of them were able to be find habitation there. So the ones who went to Red Pass had to stay in a work train, which was the intention originally, but their work train wasn't finished yet. It didn't have a kitchen car on it. That would just arrive later. So this is a group of the workers who are there. So you'll see some issei workers in the top, and in the bottom there are some of the other staff. So when I give numbers and things like that. And just like the officials did, what I'm doing is I'm just talking about the issei, but there were always other staff there. And part of the reason why is because, according to the BC Security Commission's rules, they were not allowed to operate machinery like bulldozers and stuff, which makes building roads awfully hard. So they had to have other staff to do all the things that they weren't allowed to do. But of course, there's things that are not in the rules. So what you found with the staff at Geeky is they were involved in things like blasting rocks and handling dynamite, but they still weren't allowed to drive the tractor. And another rule was that they weren't allowed to drink alcohol, but they weren't in BC. So what they did is they just went to Jasper and they went to the pub in Jasper. So there's always a way, I guess. Maybe it's difficult, but there's things you can try to do. And a lot of these pictures have antlers in them too. So in 2015, we went there and we were really fortunate because one of the park rangers there, Mike Dillon, I'm sure he didn't want us to go and mess around with stuff, but what he did was he showed us the places in person. So we didn't really have to look very hard at all because he just took us right to the places. And as you can see in Geeky, I wouldn't recommend visiting there. And part of the reason why is because it's extremely bushy because it's all grown up. And the other reason is because you probably have to access the CNR railway, as well as I think that the park staff would appreciate no visitors because there might be like sensitive remains there. So, but it's there. I think it is quite an interesting camp. I've skipped ahead. Now we're in a different camp. We're in A2 Decoyne camp, and I'm going to speed up a little bit because I won't have to explain quite as much. But I know I'm going to be missing some really key information. So like if I say anything really head scratching, I hope you will include it in the chat because I think about this all the time. So I don't necessarily know what things people know and what things only I know. So. We're now in the camp called A2 Decoyne Camp. It was if you were in Jasper and you were driving towards the BC Alberta border, you would drive for maybe about 3-4 miles, and then you'd be in A2 Decoyne Camp. And it looks a little bit rougher, but I think it was a pretty comfortable camp as they go. The thing about these camps in Jasper National Park is they were all tent camps, so they weren't really the greatest for wintertime. I don't think I would want to be in a tent in the middle of winter, but they did have really good heaters, and it was possible to make them like a double canvas, so they could be a little bit more insulating. But one of the problems this camp had after a couple of months is it was right next to the river, and it experienced an enormous flood. And we're a bit puzzled about what these men are doing in the picture. I have sort of fielded some, tried to figure out what's going on. And there's probably someone who knows, but I don't know. So my guess is it's something sort of that would bring the men all together. And I'm thinking they're probably doing something with the water in their Japanese bath called an ofuro. Maybe the water's muddy, so they're filling it. That's just an idea that I have. But the main thing is this camp here. It became uninhabitable because of the flood, and the workers who were here, they all had to move to the next camp down the line. I really love this picture, not just because there's a bear in it, but if you look at the fence, you can see there's some really interesting Japanese style design there with the vertical poles, and the care that it took to make that is, I think, caused some people to maybe wonder what that is. Is it some nice thing, and actually it's an outhouse, but it's a very nice one, except for the fact that it's a communal outhouse. I don't like that part, but it stood there for a long time, and was photographed a lot, I think, because it was kind of interesting. This picture is from the book Yellowhead Pass and Its People, which has quite a lot of stories in it about the issei who visited, because it seems like their presence was quite impactful and not surprising because the population around there is not that high, and the amount of issei who came was more than 1,500, and it could have been as many as 1,700. We're not entirely sure. So the population increased radically at that time, and maybe about half of the people who lived there at the time were like Japanese. So yeah, it was a big event around there. And here's Mike, and he's making sure we don't do any funny business to the remains there. And it was really wonderful that he was there because he's known about it for a long time, of course, being a ranger, but we didn't have to look for it. He just showed it to us. I'm not going to share the location of this because the as you can see, the remains are quite fragile, and I don't think that they would really want us to publicize the location. So you'll probably find that my location information is a little bit vague. There's a reason for that. One is that it's maybe a good idea to keep it that way, but not just because of the remains, but because a lot of the places are not safe to visit, and not safe for us and not safe for the nature. So especially in the park, you shouldn't go off trail, just like they say in the latest Lord of the Rings show, because you might damage the environment. One person probably wouldn't do anything, but there's lots of us, so we have to stay on the trails. And also there's wild animals in there, and they're really wild. They're not like pretend wild. But anyways, if you were in the camp at that time, you would have had a view something like this. So I think it was quite nice. And yeah, so there you go, A3 decline. So the next camp down the line that the men were sent to when theirs got flooded was A3 Decoyne, which is also called Dominion Prairie. And it's a really meadowy place. And unfortunately, it's one of these places where I'm sure there must be photos, but I haven't seen any, or if I have seen them, I didn't know it was A3 Decoyne, also known as Dominion Prairie. And what's helpful to know about this place is there was a community here called Dominion Prairie. So if you happen to be walking around here and you thought you saw something, it is probably not from the issei's labor camp. It may be from the community that was there before. Mike showed us some what we call berms, which are basically bumps in the ground that are left by the foundations of cabins and stuff. And we measured them, but they're not the same size as the tent houses or the habitations that would have been there at the time. And I guess I forgot to mention too that the A2 Decoyne camp, that was supposed to be designed for about 50 people. And A3 Decoyne was much bigger. It was a 100-person tent camp. And it opened on May 15th, 1942, and it closed on July 28th, 1942. The previous one closed on the day of the flood, May 27th. That's the day after, actually. Let's see what I have for pictures here. So this is kind of what the area looks like now, and I think it's like a popular cross-country skiing area. And I think that it's probably okay to visit on foot if you just stay in the grassy area. But there's nothing there really, so I think you just could go there for enjoyment. So what this is, we're at a different camp now. We've crossed the border. Okay, so we're not in the Alberta camps anymore. We're in British Columbia, and we're in Mount Robson Provincial Park. And this camp is called Yellowhead Camp, which I think has been a confusing name because it is in the area which is referred to as the Yellowhead area next to Yellowhead Lake and in the Yellowhead Pass. So I think this one kind of got lost a little bit by accident, which is actually kind of unfortunate because Yellowhead Camp is very interesting. Um, so as you can see, it was a tent camp. It was a 100-person camp. Um, and quite possibly it had more than 100 people at certain points because a lot of them could. While they were building them, they were living in a work train, which probably wasn't the best accommodations, but it's what they had to live in before they had finished their bunk houses, which in this case were tents. So while they had both, they could sometimes have more than 100 people. Um, and one of the reasons why Yellowhead Camp is so incredibly interesting is because the workers at Yellowhead Camp were so expressive. They, as you can see in this photo, they've dammed the water and they have large water channels running through their camp. You can see there's a bridge in the middle, and the bridge is made out of a tree that is still attached to the ground. So it has fallen over, and a bridge has been built on it. There you can see there's some rocks piled up on the side. This is a view from one end of the bridge, looking towards one of the little rock gardens there. And I love this photo because I enjoy the look of the small trees sort of struggling in the rocks. And I feel that it's an idea that is taken from nearby places. And I think I'll show a picture of that. I hope I included it. Let's see here. And these photos, by the way, there are courtesy of Tosh Uyeda. They're the Uyeda family photos. And one a story I'd like to share about them is that when we first tried to find this camp, we couldn't find it, and we were in the wrong place, and we ended up being chased by bees, and it wasn't fun. And then because we only had like a couple of pictures to look at to try to figure out where it was, and then the Lisa Uyeda, she shared with us some photos from here, and it just blew my mind. I had no idea there was things like this at Yellowhead Camp. I mean, just that is so amazing. Wow, so creative. And it makes me speechless just to look at that. I studied art history, so this is like just mind blowing for me. I include this picture because not only does it show like what kinds of things they put around their camps, they've got some really nice fencing. There's a gate there. It wasn't the only one. There's another gate there. And on top of there is this kind of a plane on a stick. I think it's a weather vane. And when I saw this, my jaw just dropped because I've seen this, I think. I think it might be in the Jasper Yellowhead Museum and Archives. They have something like that in there. And the interesting thing about it is it wasn't found anywhere near this part of the landscape. It was found somewhere else. So I'm guessing that someone had maybe put it there to get it in a place where it wasn't going to be like lost forever. But I'd like to have another look at it so I could measure it. It'd be great to know if that was the same one. And this is one of the things that they worked on while they were there. They had to build this very large and sturdy bridge, and they did a pretty amazing job at it. I love this photo. because for me, when I think about the issei and how they express themselves, for starters, like I think I'm going to change it to the gray, black and white version because I didn't like how the color version turned out. But um, it's a really nice group photo. I love it. There's flowers and it's just really nice. You can tell where it is. It's right at the Yellowhead rail point. But if you look at the sign, it says the it's basically saying that they nobody's allowed to be on the railway there, but yet there they are on the railway. And actually, that was one of the restrictions that they had to deal with. They weren't really allowed to be on the railway yet. They had to walk on it to get to wherever they're going many times. So there's stories about where they would have to walk along the side of the railway in the snow and just struggle along when they could be walking on it, and it'd be so much easier. Um, but in this photo, here they are. They're just kind of like a couple feet over on the railway, and there's a sign right there that says "Don't go on the railway." And I just love that because for me, like I've seen a bunch of photos which are kind of like this somehow, and so I sort of consider this a form of issei self-expression, just a tiny little bit cheeky somehow. So near Yellowhead Camp, there is a little park called Portal Lake. And I'm just going to quickly show some pictures from here because Portal Lake is really cute, lovely lake. It's very beautiful. And I feel that when I visited there recently, I just got the vibe that, you know, those rocks that I showed you earlier in the little trees, just there's a link somehow. They go back there. Here they are, just somehow. Well, I can't explain it, but I feel something. I don't know. Okay, let's go to B3 Fitzwilliam. Oh, they were out of order here. I'm going to quickly redo my little screen share here because I want to be in order. Let's see here. That figures, doesn't it? Okay. Oh, I know why. Because we're not even at there yet. Okay. All right. I'm just jumping ahead here. So actually, where we have to go next is we're going to Lucerne. So B2 Lucerne. I chose this picture, which this image here. Let's find out where it's from. So it is in the Takeo and Nobuya Kitamura collection, and I really love the photos from this collection. They show me things that that really surprise me. In this picture, I would say this is Dominion Day because there is a flag up there, which is, of course, it's not the modern Canadian flag. And there, I think there's a lot of pictures from this day. There was some baseball tournaments going on. All right, let's see here. I chose these baseball ones because baseball seemed to be really important to the people of who were in Lucerne. And I don't think I can get rid of that thing on the top. Just ignore it. They had several baseball leagues because they had so many people who were interested in baseball in Lucerne. And I to me that is very interesting because Lucerne is and was a place of historical interest because it was a former headquarters of the rail station. It was associated with the Canadian Northern Railway and the Grand Trunk Railway. And there was quite a large community here. So there's lots and lots of stuff around there that is related to Lucerne, the original Lucerne community there. And they also were super into baseball back in those days too. So I enjoy the continuity there. Maybe it's just a nice place to play baseball. So when these workers arrived, and they were the second group to arrive. They arrived on the same day as the first group on February 24th in 1942. When they arrived, there were like derelict buildings everywhere, including a really big train station, which was quite interesting actually. And they ended up using the train station as one of their camp buildings. And that is the one on the side in this picture. And the rest of their buildings were either these tents, as you can see, or they were various wooden buildings that they might have either used from the old Lucerne or maybe built new ones. But one of their jobs was to take down the old buildings of Lucerne because they were considered to be an eyesore by, I guess, the new rail company that was in. I might have that wrong, but I do know that they were involved in taking down the old buildings. So behind this baseball field, I decided I was going to take a picture of the trees, and you can see it's still kind of similar looking, but the whole train has been reshaped over there by the Highway 16, so it doesn't completely match. And this one is Whitney Lake, which is just in front of a very large mountain range, and it probably has a lot of names. I know it is the Seven Sisters Mountain Range. Maybe somebody else has other name for it. And this obviously is soon after they arrived because the lake is all frozen. And you can see there's like a dock on the side, and there were many pictures taken from the dock. And you can, in this picture, is sort of similar angle. You can sort of see where the dock used to be, but the whole edge of the shore is a different shape because nature has its own plans for things, I guess. And this is a sort of another view of the dock. And I took this one because there are photos that were taken from this point of view also. So a nice comparison. And there's the mountain range behind. There's another bigger lake here called Yellowhead Lake. And that's just a little bit off to the side. It's very nice there too. Over by Yellowhead Lake, I encountered this animal from very close up, like a few inches. It was like, went into the woods and one of the trees turned around and looked at me. So I got out of there really quick. And then I went away, and then he went away in the water, and he's looking at the forest, wondering where I am, but I'm not there anymore. So yeah, so this area is visitable, and there's nice views like this, but there is animals, and there's holes in the ground, and it's tempting, but definitely do not disturb anything. It's a provincial park. Everything that's there, including bumps in the ground, it might be something important, historically important. So I just got to leave it alone. And they also had a viewing pavilion there, and 3 of the camps in the northern parts had these. And this is a photo from Bob Pritchard, who went through there, and I think it was in 1949. And the fellow who's inside there is camping in there. And that's one of the things that people did after all of the issei were gone. They really appreciate these things, and they continue to visit them and enjoy them and try to use them. And in some cases, try to save them or replicate them because they were enjoyed so much. Okay, now we're at Fitzwilliam. And there isn't really anything to see here because, well, there's just nothing there. So Fitzwilliam, one of the reasons why there's nothing there is because Fitzwilliam was a camp that was intended to exist, but they didn't, I don't think they got past sort of leveling the ground. So they intended for it to be a pretty big camp, and it was a tent camp, but I don't think they installed the canvas. So it was pretty hard to find it. All I knew is it was somewhere close to these old bridge piers. And what we decided on was that it was at the Gita Mountain viewpoint, which is a pretty beautiful place. And since you don't want to park along the side of the road, that's dangerous. This place actually offers the opportunity to get off the road a little bit. So So I'd say this place is visitable, but there isn't anything here though. And what we believe is it's probably because the water resources were not easily accessible. So maybe they chose not to go to this spot and went to the other spot, which was before Fitzwilliam. A little bit further down, Fitzwilliam is named after this mountain here. So before Fitzwilliam, we couldn't find anything there either. And it's because we're pretty sure it's because it was just completely destroyed by the way the landscape is altered by railway and the highway in that area. And it was a pretty small camp compared to the other ones. It was 50-person tent camp. And it was open later, so like April 16th. So maybe a couple months later after the first one. And the people who were in it were people who were being moved from other camps because they were starting to shift people around. And one of the reasons why is because around this time, the men who had they'd been at this time, like their families were already being sent to the internment camps in the interior. And it was causing no end of stress to the workers up here because they were having to confront this from really far away. They couldn't do anything. They could only just sort of hear about it. And it was on the news always. So whatever news sources that they had, they would just like absorb that. And their families at that time were presented with an option where, okay, you can get back together, but you have to do something like go to this farm in Alberta, the sugar beet farm, and work there all in a family group. And you can't go back. This is where you have to go. So many of the workers felt that this was the only way they could get back to their families, and they chose that route. And that is definitely a whole another field of study for sure, and it's so interesting. But for this camp and for all the other camps, what this meant is the project started to lose workers. There was workers still coming, but even more workers were going away. And the whole pretense of doing stuff was really starting to wear thin. So people were being shifted around to try to cope with the loss of labor. But Fitzwilliam was in a way kind of like a place where the workers were sent from various camps if they were not going to be allowed to return to their families or weren't considered to have anyone to return to, which was the more common option. So they would be referred to as single. And a lot of times they weren't single, their family was in Japan, or they were maybe part of a family unit, but because they weren't married to someone, then they weren't allowed to return to them. And those workers ended up being sent on to other camps in the system and having to stay in the system for as late as 1946. So yeah, it was not the greatest situation. Let's see here. There was a bit of stuff around there, like bits of wood, but it could have come from the railway. And then we found some raspberries, so like maybe people lived here. They could be wild raspberries, but people like wild raspberries. Just essentially, we just couldn't find anything. So I wouldn't recommend visiting there. A, because it's on the railway property and it's dangerous. But B, because you just won't really see anything. There's nothing. It's been kind of reshaped completely. And there's a chance with this one that we went to the wrong place, and it's pretty hard to know because we couldn't find anything. So the next one, we're going to go to Grant Brook. What am I doing for time? Wow. Of course, I knew I was gonna. I'm going to speed up just a little bit because I love to talk about these way too much. Grant Brook uh, is kind of going to be hard to speed up because it's just really neat. Um, the workers here put a lot of energy into their gardens, and it's like a compact little garden in the middle of their camp, but it's really interesting. It's got bridges and it's got kind of like rock work, and you can see in this picture they are doing something in the middle, and what they're doing is they're directing water from the Moose River into the camp, and the purpose is to flow it into the water channel like this. And I had to color this image because I wanted to show how the water was the same color as the Moose River. That's where it came from. I didn't have to do anything. I just added color. The water was like this. So like the photographer captured it. And here's some more waterworks there underneath one of the bridges. And they've made a pipe out of wood. They're just showing it to the photographer there. Another thing about Grant Brook is that this picture didn't really show it. This is from the Memorial Matacoro collection, by the way, which is in the Nikkei Heritage Center's collection. And it doesn't really say where it is. And it was possibly at Jasper, but when I looked at this, I realized, oh, that's Grant Brook, and that's the Moose River flowing by the side. There's another picture which I didn't choose because it was a vertical format. But what it shows is the river flowing on the other side too, because Grant Brook was an island, and I didn't realize that until I had seen the other picture. We had seen water channels there, and we wondered when they had existed, when the other bit of the river could have gone around the other side. But until I saw these photos, I didn't realize that, yeah, it was an island then too, and there was two bridges. There was a bridge on the other side too. And this is not a tent camp anymore, as you can see. These are wood frame bunk houses for 100 people. The camp opened on March 30th, and it closed around August 12th. And a large number of the workers here were older, so there might have been more seniors here than in other camps. There weren't supposed to be seniors, but there were. And here are this is the current state of the gardens, and it's frankly quite amazing that they exist because they were building so many things right over this site. And my thinking is, I just have a hunch based on things that have been mentioned, that there are some unsung heroes out there who have prevented the routing of various routes to go right over top of these interesting areas. Just a little bit of a closer view. There's a little stick up on the side over that channel. And it's probably that little tiny bridge in the background, but it would be great to know for sure. The rocks will be all in different places because they get dug around by bears who are looking for things underneath. And I just want to show this because it's a picture of me and my dad there, and some of the hazards you can encounter around there, like you might like get stuck in the mud, like my buddy there. He's taking a picture of me and my dad, and we're taking a picture of him. Or there's some very beautiful canyons around there, which are all sort of sloped inward. So when my buddy's taking pictures, it's kind of terrifying. But yeah, so very, very beautiful, and it's possible to visit. It's best if you have a guide, and definitely stay away from places like this, although they are extremely beautiful. The next one, Rainbow. Rainbow is another bunkhouse camp. It's a 100-person, opened on February 24th, closed on July 28th. It's on the shore of Moose Lake. And And it's another place that would be super interesting if we could explore it. But unfortunately, it was right at the squeeze point where the pipeline, the railway, and the highway all came together, and it just completely went right over top of it. And there is nothing. There's like there is some lake there. You can't really get to it because the train is there, and it's possible to get stuck down there. It was really hard to climb back out of this spot. There's a rest area to the east. I would advise going there instead. And this is all that we could find of the original terrain, just this one little spot. So it's pretty much gone. And this is Red Pass, B7 Red Pass. And it is a 100-person wood frame bunkhouse camp, still in Mount Robson Provincial Park. And also at the very close to the community of Red Pass that existed at the time. Right now, there's nothing there. There's only forest because Red Pass is gone now. But at the time, it was a very lively place, and the workers there had some conveniences because there was like a store there and other things. And they had built a big hospital for the project up here. So it was the project's headquarters in 1942. And it is, let's see, here. Oh, this is another photo from the Kitamura collection. And it shows that Red Pass also had gardens too. And the rock behind him is in the shape that's called an ishidoro, and they all had these. It seemed like standard. You had to have one, and you had to put it in the picture. So even camps that didn't have gardens often had one of those. I'd love to know more about these things so I could understand why that was, but I thought that would be interesting pointed out. Red Pass might be named after these red rocks above the area, or it might not. But as you can see, there's a road there, so it is possible to go in there. There isn't anything there, and if you saw anything, it might be from the community of Red Pass. But it is not a place which is extremely dangerous or anything. Just got to stay off the railway. There's a little tote road going along beside the railway. You can go, and it'll look kind of like this as you're walking. And we're right now. I'm going to just skip B11 Dijon because it's another one where there was nothing there. But people were walking around the region. This is near Mount Robson. I can see Mount Robson in the corner there, so I thought I'd include this one. But yeah, there's B11 Tijon was built, but for 100 people, and it was completely built, but nobody ever lived there. So what happened to it is in 1946, when they sold the camp buildings, they sold that one, and it either this one or the other Tijon camp, B12 Tijon, was turned into building material, and some of it ended up in one of the local grocery stores in Valemount called Mortensen's store. And another thing near there is Rearguard Falls. There is a photo taken by one of the people there of this place, and these days, if they took the same photo, it would have like this raft in it probably. Tijon Camp has a view of Mica Mountain, which is right there. Oh, look at, we're only halfway through and I'm still on Tijon Camp. What do I do? I'm just going to keep going. Tijon Camp is probably the most famous of the camps which has gardens in it. And rightfully so, because the gardens that they made there, they're just so beautiful, and they include a lot of obviously formal elements, a lot of skill made in making them, and they look really rustic, but that style is very it goes back a long time. It's probably like hundreds of years. So there's something to everything that they were doing in there. Everything had some kind of meaning. Their job there, because they were mostly senior citizens there, was to be farmers for the project. So they arrived at the end of March, so April 1st, and they didn't get to leave till about October 10 because they had to bring the harvest in. And they were all pretty elderly. Most of them were seniors, and but they're also all very dignified. And the local community of Tijon, they really loved them, and the farmers would bring their children over and visit with them on a frequent basis. And so people, after they were after they left, the structures stayed there for a while before they were destroyed by the highway. And before they were destroyed, they were really enjoyed. And you can see this young fellow there. He's probably getting ready for a picnic in there. And the previous image there was from one of the local history books called Yellowhead Pass and Its People. There's communal outhouses in most of these places, and they seem to, like, the building materials got recycled, but nobody wanted to recycle the outhouses. So there is this kind of stuff there, but it's on private property. There's a rest stop there, so I recommend going to the rest stop and enjoying that, and probably not disturbing the private property. But there is things like this in the area. This is the kind of thing that is next to the rest stop. It was probably also part of the camp there. There is, like, but I'm taking a picture of the piece of wood that's embedded in the ground. It's quite beautiful as well. Speaking of saving things, this was in Tijon camp, and it was saved by locals. This photo was contributed by Gene Blackman, a local there. He explained that it was taken out of there so it wouldn't get ruined, and it lived up in the hills for many, many, many years. The paint was added later, probably just to help preserve it. But I like the color choices. They kind of remind me of colors that would have been popular in earlier times. And it's unique because it's a seven-sided, and I'll just leave it at that. It's a seven-sided Japanese water wheel. And so now we're in Albreda Camp. We've left the Yellowhead Pass. We're now in the North Thompson. And since we're short on time, I'm going to trim it down quite a bit. But suffice it to say that they're all going to be wood frame bunkhouses down this way, except for Pyramid Camp and Red Sands Camp. Red Sands Camp was originally a tent camp. It was a former relief camp that was a tent camp, so that's why it's tent. And Pyramid Camp is a tent camp because I think it's because they built it in a rush. So it's tents, and it turned into wooden buildings after. Albreda Camp was built on a slope. I think the buildings there were probably continued to be used until they were taken down, probably in 1946. And the Albreda camp was probably not a terribly pleasant camp to be in. They didn't have a great experience there, and I think they were on strike a lot, which resulted in many of them being sent to Red Sands camp just to try to alleviate some of the conflicts that were happening between the supervisors and the staff. Another story. Okay, let's go to the inside of the mess hall there. And the photo is from the Masao Yoshitake collection, and it seems like a I really want to say about this one. So I'm just going to move on, but there's that calendar on the wall is a Yamataxi calendar. Just remember that. Group photo, and Dominion Day, hanging out with the people of Albreda, and having a kind of a sports day, I guess. Then there were baseball games, of course. Alberta Glacier is the view that you'll experience there, and there is rock work everywhere. And this thing, which might have been an outhouse. Um, B17 Black Spur, it is a place you shouldn't go because it is too far from the road, and you could very easily get lost, and especially do not go anywhere near the mill site on the other side of the river. Way too dangerous. But at the time, I think it was a very pleasant camp. They they did quite a lot to it. I think that might be a pin cherry tree that they've left growing there. And this is possibly maybe their mess hall. But I love what they've done around the outside. Also, lots of work to make it more comfortable. But to even get close to it, you have quite a bit of stuff to go through. And this is just what parts that you could maybe drive, and then you have to go actually into the woods there to get anywhere. So I don't think it should be considered as a place to visit. This is how we figured out where it was. Oh, you can't see those mountains, but they do match. The geography matches, and there's the mill on the other side. So Gosnell Camp. All I'm going to say about Gosnell Camp is that it was probably a terrible place. Maybe not all the time, but by the time, and maybe it wasn't a terrible place to actually be, but by the beginning of August, Gosnell Camp was so shunned. The camp supervisors couldn't get any issei to move there when they were trying to consolidate the camps. And one official wrote that if they were to move any issei workers to Gosnell, it would require the involvement of the armed forces. That was how much people did not want to go there. And one of the reasons why is because two people lost their lives here. One on the first day that they arrived, which was like for health reasons, and then the other was a landslide that occurred while they were working. And then another reason why is there was quite a significant strike here, which in modern terms would probably we describe what happened as a small riot. And I guess I won't be able to tell the story because I don't have time, but there were many people who were interned from this camp, and it even resulted in the town of Blue River having its own little mini internment camp for a while, which is about the size of a one-room schoolhouse. So there, yeah, people here managed, I'm sure, but I don't think it was a great place. And it's not really a lot there because it was completely reshaped by logging activities. And so it's possible to go in there and walk around, but you have to be careful because a lot of it's private property. And there's not really much to see there anyway. Ooh, really speeding along. Okay, we're going to Lempriere. This bridge, I think, has been seen by many people who know something about Lempriere. And it only lasted for a short time. Unfortunately, the current is very strong. You can see it pulling. You can see the wake behind these piers here, and it started to twist the bridge. So they eventually had to replace it. But that's pretty normal for bridges around there. This shed here, this was probably a guardhouse for some very bored guards. Yeah, the role of it, I think, was to guard the bridge that they just built. And near Lempriere is a little bit of interesting roadway through the forest. It was the original road that got paved for a bridge detour. And so you can still walk through the forest that normally would have overgrown it because it had pavement on it. It's kind of neat to be able to walk on the original road. And there's still a bit of stuff left from the old bridge. I wouldn't go here because it's really, really hard to get in there. It is possible to do it, but I think you'll need a guide and it's possible you might get stuck. So I don't know. I would maybe not go right down here. But walking on that little road's probably okay. Just don't go too close to the edge. You might fall into the river or something. The landscape around there was a bit unstable, and I feel that probably contributed to the accident where the man lost his life. This is Pyramid, and it was a tent camp in the middle of winter, but I think they've started to build cabins at that time, so you can see some wooden buildings there. The picture isn't that greatest because it's I can't really find too many pictures of Pyramid. They're probably out there, but I just haven't seen any. Same with Gosnell. There's pictures of Gosnell, but I just haven't seen them. And it had a little footbridge in front, so sometimes I think this gets mistaken for a spot in Tashme that had a similar kind of thing. But this is Pyramid here, and of course bears everywhere. And there is Pyramid Falls. So this is Thunder River. Thunder River was probably the most important camp in the North Thompson part of the Yellowhead-Blue River Highway Project. Wow, I feel like I'm skipping over so many details here. It must be really confusing. But Thunder River it opened in March 26, 1942, and it closed in May 24th, 1946, and it was the last camp to close. And the workers who were here were mostly in that status of being single workers. So essentially that means for a good number of them, they weren't single, but they had family in Japan that they were not allowed to go back to yet, or it wasn't the right time, or maybe they didn't even want to go back, but here they are. And they were there for quite a while, so they cleared the entire area around the camp, and it must have been an enormous job to do that because those trees are enormous. These are really big trees in this area. And as a result, I guess a lot of their buildings were log buildings. So in pictures of Thunder River, you'll see lots of log buildings. That is the Thunder River underneath the bridge that they're on. And this picture was colored sort of automatically, but the color of the river is sort of like that. And there were lots of buildings around the camp too. We hoped we could maybe find something, but I don't think there is anything left there. They're at the Thunder River site. That area there, it is possible to visit it, and it actually is very pleasant to visit. At least it was in 2015 when I was there, because of the clearing, they turned that spot into a rest area. And I don't want to say that was the beginning of the Thunder River rest area, because my suspicion is it wasn't. That was probably just part of the whole Thunder River continuity somehow, but and I don't know it, so I can't really share it. But suffice it to say that if I was to recommend a place to visit, rest areas are great. So if the Thunder River rest area is there, then yeah, might as well visit Thunder River. This is one of the ways we could verify where the camps were. So this photo is a great example because if I was to move just a few feet to the left or the right, that the shape of the mountain changed enough for me to realize that I wasn't in the right place. So you could actually end up standing right where the photographer was standing, and it was kind of right about there. Just maybe a little bit off, but pretty close. So originally that grass wouldn't have been there, and there would have been some buildings there. And what is here now is, I guess, lots of gophers. So watch out. And also some original stumps from where the camp was. Those are probably in the picture too. So if I go to the last camp is Red Sands. And Red Sands, I guess I didn't really explain this very well in the beginning, but for people who are familiar with relief camps and the Great Depression era of employment service camps, you'd be going to yourself like, those look exactly the same. All those bunk houses, all those tent houses, everything. And the reason why is because, yeah, they are the same. The tent fabric was recycled from the employment service camps during the Great Depression era. If you're not familiar with them, they're a very controversial program where people who were unemployed were maybe part of the controversy would be some of them were willing and some of them were not willing to go into these camps to labor, and the conditions weren't always that good. The material from the camps and the plans were recycled to build the 1942 camps of the Yellowhead-Blue River Highway Project. And some of the tent fabric is still stamped ES. So if you're looking at pictures and you see ES, that stands for employment service, and it means that the fabric was formerly used for a relief camp in the probably anywhere in BC or Alberta. Could have been all over the place. And with Red Sands, the entire camp was recycled. It was a relief camp, and they just reopened it. I think it had been in use about 8 years before that. So as a result, it was in a location that probably wasn't authorized because they wanted to have the camps not very close to the railways, but Red Sands was like basically right at the railway. It was just up the slope from there. And there is also nothing there. And I guess I'll have to wrap it up. I'll just say that the reason why there was nothing there in any of those places is because when at the end of the war, there was a building boom, and every building material that was possibly available was used because there was a building material shortage. So all of the camp buildings probably turned into other buildings. So if there's stories about this building used to be part of this camp, it's probably somehow true because that happened. And I think I'm going to I have so much to talk about. It's so interesting, but I will wrap it up because it's like 15 minutes after, and I want to see what I've forgotten to tell you. If you're able to share that with me in chat, because I would love to be able to answer any questions that anyone remaining may still have. Let's see, where are we? So, oh, I see. I don't see any questions yet. If there is any questions, oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. That's why. Oh, wait, there's a whole Q&A section. Oh, awesome. All right. Okay, I'm going to.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay. So, yes. So right now, because we went a bit over time, I think we've
Yep.
only got enough time for 2 questions.
Okay.
So I'll read out the first one. This is from Cam Teo. Leanne, you mentioned that these locations are inaccessible and you do not wish to mention their locations. Is there a process in which discussions can take place to actually have them accessible eventually, years later? This is important history which all Canadians need to learn. Thanks.
Yeah, like Cam, that is a great question and one that I want to know the answer. I mean, because it's a serious problem when cultural groups can't access their own history. That's so unfair, and like who gets to manage that, right? Um, the issue that I have is I'm like an indie historian, I don't have much clout, I'd have to say. So all I can say is I just like to put it out there for whoever's listening is it's really important for cultural groups to be able to access their own histories. And I think that sometimes it's okay to push a little bit for that because you know we this is our history as well as other people's history. I do understand that you know there has to be concerns about whether things get destroyed or not, or but and also too very valid safety concerns because some of those places like honestly don't go there. I worry for you if you go there. I don't want to be responsible for you getting your foot stuck in a hole and being lost forever. Um, but um, but other places, if I could, I would take a group and I would go there like right now because it would be really interesting.
Okay, so the next question we have is from Patrick Akiyama. Did any of the men write about their work camp experiences? If so, can the accounts be accessed?
There is a book by a man named Takeo Ujo Nakano who went to B1 Yellowhead Camp, and he also went to A3 to Coin Camp. And then because he really wanted to rejoin his family, so he kind of protested, not really strongly, I guess, but because he protested, he ended up an angler, which is the worst possible situation. So he wrote a lot about the camps that he was in and his experience. So everything from the beginning to all the way to the end of being in Hastings Park. And that is a really interesting book. And there are other accounts out there. Um, if you love old newspapers, I recommend digging into the archives and looking for the New Canadian Nisei newspaper because it's written half in English, and there that will cover some pre-war years and many post-war years, but they were writing the whole times and they had difficulty because they were the only Japanese newspaper that was allowed to be printed at the time, and they were being censored, of course, so that doesn't make it easy to speak your mind, but um, so much information in there. uh, there's like an avalanche of things I could suggest, but that's a good place to start, I think.
Thank you for taking the time to answer these questions. Right now, this will be the official end of the presentation, but if it's okay with Leanne, we'd like to keep the Zoom room open for anybody who wants to chat with Leanne and talk about this research